It's been 5 weeks since the new season kicked off in treacherous wet conditions at the Zandvoort circuit in the Netherlands. 17 cars lined up on the grid, only 7 finished the feature in an action-packed race day that saw Malaysia and France come out on top.
Massive accident.
Oh, I hope it does lost it.
Jeremy, that's a lot of damage.
Oh, can you believe it? Charlie Kimball is off.
Out of control.
France wins in the wet at Zandvoort.
After missing out in Zandvoort, Team GBR are back with a new driver, Danny Watts, and he's looking forward to the challenge ahead.
The pressure's going to be on to perform on the circuit over the course of the weekend. So I'm going to just do my best, give 110% and work well with the team, and we'll see where we're at.
This weekend, A1GP returns to China for a 6th time, but to a new venue, as Chengdu, the capital of the Sichuan province, makes its debut. Today, it's qualifying. Hello and welcome to round 2 of this season's A1GP Championship, a new track this weekend, which has plenty to live up to after an entertaining opener in Holland a few weeks back. The time between then and now has meant we almost have a full grid for Chengdu, and Team GBR gets its first shot at glory with Danny Watts at the wheel.
Danny was with us in Zhuhai for the rookie session, and he was up there with the other front-running teams. Secondly, Danny's also tested the A1GP Ferrari car, and for which reason it will give us a slight advantage against other teams who have already tested, as Team Great Britain haven't actually had the chance to test our car yet.
Well, it's obviously a great privilege and an honour to be driving for your nation, in effect. And it came out of the blue. Really wasn't expecting it, to be honest, but I'm gonna take the opportunity with both hands, wring the neck out of it, and do my best. We've got a lot of work to do. I've never been to the circuit before. It's going to be a first time at Chengdu for me and for the team, I think. So we've got a lot to learn. Still got a lot of work to do with the car still, but we're going to go there, knuckle down, and take every session as it comes, dialing the car in. Between us, we've got to get used to the car. That's going to take a little bit of time, but ultimately we're there to perform and try and win.
Now, Danny, aren't you a little bit worried with all the work going on behind you and the work you're going to have to do over there, that you're always going to be playing catch-up?
Well, that's the bottom line, really, isn't it? I mean, everyone else has had some running practically, and Zandvoort the whole meeting. So, yeah, we're behind on kilometres, we're behind on mileage. We've got a lot of catching up to do. But we've got the right group of people, mechanics, engineers to make it happen. And like I said before, we're going to go there, get on the track, get the car bedded in quickly, and then start on the development process with the car and then see where we're at.
A1 have adjusted the point system within the championship so that the teams that weren't in Zandvoort actually have the opportunity to catch up with the other teams. In terms of our actual team, Team Great Britain, we've got a fantastic driver, we've got a great team. The team have been with us for the last couple of seasons, and I think that we'll pull it together and win the championship.
How are you going to be able to hang on to your seat?
It's going to be difficult for me. It's go to Chengdu, and ultimately I've just got to do my normal preparation. We'll do the track walk. I'll do as much homework as I can before I get there, and obviously the pressure's going to be on to perform on the circuit over the course of the weekend. So I'm going to just do my best, give 110% and work well with the team, and we'll see where we're at.
So plenty to look forward to, not least seeing what Danny Watts can do in the GBR car. Motor racing expert Tony Jardine with me in the studio. Tony asking questions there as well. Danny will become the 4th driver to race for Team GBR. Tony, is he a safe pair of hands?
He's a very safe pair of hands. We're talking about a man that's beaten Lewis Hamilton in his championship year in Formula Renault. A lot of single-seater experience. He was teammate to Kimi Räikkönen, and he's had subsequently a lot of sports car experience. He's good technically, he's very fast. He's got 10 years top-line experience. And
he's got the experience of having tested in this A1GP car as well.
He's tested both kinds. He ran in the Lola Zytek car, he's tested the Powered by Ferrari car, he had 2 days test, but as he pointed out, that was in the early development days. That's been cancelled out now by the experience that the other teams already have.
By the way, for news on who is in the driving seat for their respective nations, all you have to do is keep an eye on the crawl at the bottom of your screen. Let's talk about Zandvoort. It was a wet and wild weekend, wasn't it? An exciting way to open the series. But moving that forward, what can we expect from Chengdu?
This is a very difficult one because it's the first international race series that's ever visited the circuit. So how is the circuit going to stand up? It's also extremely green, it's raw, it's dusty, but it's got amazing bumps and corrugations which are really causing a lot of problems for the teams. How they set up the car, physically how the drivers are taking it, how will they go through the long feature race when the car's taking a battering and the drivers are taking a battering too. So there's a lot of question marks.
Michael Andretti has his son Marco racing this weekend. Let's just take a look at him in practice action right now. How exciting a prospect is Team USA this campaign?
Well, you're looking at racing royalty. You're looking at a racing dynasty. In the United States of America, these are godlike people. You know, his dad, 1991 Champ Car champion, and he had the closest, Marco had the closest ever finish at Indianapolis in 2006. So he's heir apparent, really, and it's fabulous to have the Andrettis involved with A1GP.
OK, Tony, thanks very much for the moment. It is a new circuit, of course, for this race weekend. So how will the drivers adapt to it, especially when they're still finding their feet in that new A1GP car? John Watson went to find out.
A1GP paid their first visit to the Chengdu International Circuit in China, where John Watson was joined by local driver Ho Ping Tung.
Hoping we're back in your home country, China, and a brand new venue in Chengdu.
Yeah, we are. And the track itself looks very exciting, especially here, the main straight, start-finish straight. As you can see, very wide and the perfect opportunity to use your push-to-pass, power boost button. Going into the first corner, one of the best places, I think, on this track, probably the only one, real good one, to overtake. But as you can see, it's also quite bumpy under braking. So you will see a lot of locking inside wheels going into the long turn one.
So you think that drivers are going to go side by side actually at this part of the racetrack, and then, well, if they're side by side here, how are they both going to get out of the corner without touching?
Well, nobody knows, of course, because there are just a few drivers who have driven here before. But I think there will be, especially at the start, there will be more lines possible. But we'll have to find out in the free practice whether there's enough grip on the outside to actually take this line.
Hoping as you come up to the completion of a lap, you've got a chicane. And I have to say, if I've ever seen a wing-wrecking chicane on any racetrack, that's it.
Yeah, well, especially if you have a good exit and a quick right-hander before, you might want to make a move going into the chicane. But you have to make sure the other driver is not going to cut to the inside, because there's no space to avoid an accident and hitting the curb and having a fair chance to take off your front wing.
3.3 kilometres in length, 13 corners, and turn one comes up under the bridge. But look at the bumps under braking as you go into turn one. Two blends, and then the exit of the corner is very straightforward. Back to the right-hand side of the circuit, and hard braking, the bumps again right on the line. An unnaturally high water table here at Chengdu causes water to seep through, and inevitably it's always on the apex of a corner. Immediately you have a quick flick to the left, and then there's a charge down to the very bumpy, look at those bumps, entering turn 5. Keep the car neat here, because immediately you have to cut back to the right for turn 6, and again, look, water on the apex, then back to the left for turn 7, and now climb uphill into turn 8. It opens up and blends into turn 9, one of the quickest corners here in Chengdu. The run down into turn 10 is downhill, so easy on the brakes, make your apex, and then immediately back to the right for this 3-part turn 11. The final part, of course, leads into the notorious chicane, turns 12 and 13. Well done, Ho Ping. You stayed off those curbs, you survived the lap, and we're now back onto the main straight, where we'll see speeds up to 270 kilometers per hour on this Chengdu International Circuit.
It's bumpy, apparently. Danny Watts, then, has been recruited to help kickstart Team GBR's season in Chengdu. He's been speaking to Diana Binks.
Thanks, Georgie. Yes, I'm with Danny Watts, who's been drafted in by Team Great Britain this weekend. Danny, a good weekend. Welcome to the championship. A new team, new car, and a brand new circuit. How do you prepare for that?
Yeah, I mean, it came around very late, actually, so didn't have time to think about it from my perspective, from the driver's perspective. So it was a case of getting my helmet and hands device, flying out, and here we are. We've had the day's testing yesterday. This morning's just gone really well, and we're in the ballpark. I mean, there's been a lot of work for the boys. I mean, they've had 4 hours sleep in the last 2 days, working through the night. So I mean, they've been really up against it, getting the car ready and getting the parts for the car. But so far it's been going really well. We've been pretty much on the pace so far in all the tests, and the car's pretty well balanced. Just yeah, hoping for a couple of good results this weekend to, you know, pay back the boys and get some good points on the board.
So what can you take from the practice sessions that you've had, you know, as we go into the qualifying session? Obviously you've been trying to gauge as much information as you can, but you've been starting really from a blank piece of paper. So what have you gained from the experience you've had so far?
Well, it's a new car, it's a new circuit and a new driver, so getting all those elements together has been, it's gone quite quickly actually, and we're on top of the game. I mean, we've learnt about the car, what makes it tick now. This is a very unique circuit, it's very, very bumpy. There's a long straight which is going to offer overtaking opportunities. Then you've got the tight first section, then the second sector is very quick. So it's a balance of getting that, you know, aero and mechanical grit right. But so far, yeah, I think we're on top of the game. I'm used to the car. It's so difficult getting used to it from like the Porsche that I've been driving all year. But yeah, just now solely concentrate on putting all the efforts into qualifying and sticking it on pole.
How would you like to see qualifying go?
Yeah, got to be right at the sharp end. It's going to be difficult to overtake around here. I think the qualifying setup to the race setup will be a little bit different. But the balance we've got at the moment is really good. We're competitive. I think we end up that session right at the front, pretty much. So yeah, realistically, the pace we've shown so far, we've got to be on the front row for both sprint and feature.
Well, for the moment, Dan, thanks ever so much and go well in that qualifying session. And it's back to you, Georgie, in the studio.
Thanks, Danny. Can't knock his confidence, can you? Can Danny Watts make his testing in the new car count, though? We'll soon find out in qualifying. That's next. Welcome back to Chengdu, China. A1GP gearing up for its second race day of the season with 4 10-minute qualifying segments about to get underway. Let's get you trackside to our commentary team with John Watson and Ben Edwards.
In A1GP.
Yes, big name, big family reputation in motorsport around the world. Formula One, Indy cars, IRL, whatever. Even NASCAR in the case of Uncle Mario. So a lot for Marco Andretti to have to carry alongside, coming to a brand new venue, a brand new race series for him, brand new race car as well. Didn't get to drive it until Friday morning, but typically of the Andretti family, straight in the car and straight on the throttle.
Well, here's a man who's always straight on the throttle, and that's John Martin for Australia. He had a little bit of an off this morning. It wasn't a serious one. He grazed the nose cone of the car. They had to replace that, but otherwise no damage done. Now, he's an attacking style of driver. This circuit is a strange track, easy to overdrive, but you have to attack to a certain level. Real control required. Little lock up there on the right front, but that hasn't cost him too much time. And John, we're really watching John Martin put together the first hard lap in this qualifying session.
Yes, coming down to turn 5, one of the really bumpy parts of the track. And in many cases, some drivers finding they should stay in the middle of the road rather than the traditional line on the right. Then the sequence of corners through turn 6, coming up to 7, and then into the beginning of turn 8, and that immediately flows into turn 9, at which point the drop down into turn 10. You've got to be careful braking downhill a little bit earlier on the brakes, settle the car, and then into turn 11.
Yeah, that looked pretty neat and tidy from John Martin. Australia on the points board after their efforts in Zandvoort, particularly with the feature race. He finished 4th in that feature race, so Australia are sitting 5th in the points. Good start to the season for them. Let's see how this first flying lap. We're looking for the 1 minute 15s for a really good time. Is he going to be that quick? No. 1:17.0. Not a bad first effort. I say we're looking for 1 minute 15s, but remember they only get the 1 out lap and 1 flying lap. It might be quite hard to get the tyres fully working in just 1 out lap to go that quickly.
Indeed it is, and I think that a lot of drivers might have picked up this morning that they need to go hard on that out lap, because it's on that single flying lap that they've only got this opportunity in this session to go out and record a time. And if you want to get those tyres to come with you, then go hard on your out lap and hope on the flying lap, effectively your second lap, that the time will be there. Looking down at Korea, bumping over the curbs on the exit, Jin Wu Huang, and third car on track. Indonesia second, biggest, substantially behind, and Korea go third on a 1:20.102.
Yep, so Jinwoo Huang putting in his first qualifying effort. First time that he's qualified like this in A1GP, because remember at Zandvoort we had a very different system where all the cars were allowed to go out for as much as they liked within that 1 hour session.
Yeah, just to give you an idea of the difficulty of qualifying in this format single lap. This morning, Jinwoo Huang on sets of tyres that were used was actually about a second quicker than he was on that single lap. And this is where experience and just depth of knowledge of the more experienced drivers plays to their strengths. Now here's a man who got tons of experience but really struggled with the car. Again, was very aggressive over the bumps into turn 5.
That's right, he's on his outlap at the moment, Faraz Fawzi. There is Marco Andretti. So our first view in an official qualifying session of the 21-year-old son of Michael Andretti and grandson of the great Mario Andretti. You raced against Mario, John. You had a few wheel-to-wheel matches with Mario Andretti, and now we're seeing a third generation coming along and seeing what he can do in A1GP.
Well, they're all hard racers. They don't give an inch, but the thing with the Andretti family is that they always race fair. And I think just a comment from Marco, when he could have won Indy 500 in 2006, all he had to do was block, I forget who it was, and take the victory. But he said, Andretti's don't do that sort of thing. And he forewent the victory in his first race at Indy 500.
Well, he's had a pretty good career, even though he's only 21 years old. Big test this in it, and I think it's a great challenge for Andretti Green Racing to come into A1GP, and for Marco to put that reputation, that name on the line. He's going to be finding it's a competitive series, but I'm sure he's up to it. Now then, let's keep an eye on Faraz Fawzi, winner of the first race, of course. Brilliant start to the season for Team Malaysia.
But he's 0.2 of a second down. And that first intermediate, so the Australia time, 1:17.054, still stands. We've had 3 times recorded. We've got now out in the field about another 6 cars.
Yeah, so Fawzi needs to find a little more time if possible. He was very quick in those appallingly wet conditions at Zandvoort. Oh, he gets the back end of the car a little loose there.
No, and he tried to hold the car very tight coming out of turn 7. Didn't work from now through 8 and 9 and the drop downhill into 10. Ireland and Switzerland both got caught out there this morning by just being a little bit quick into the corner. The back end stepped out and they ended up in the gravel.
Remember, Malaysia, joint leaders of the series coming into this event after that great start at Zandvoort. The victory and a second place in the feature race. They need to try and get a bit more pace here today, though. Let's see if they're going to challenge the time of Australia, currently quickest across the line. No, not quicker than Australia. 1/10 of a second slower. They go second for the moment.
And waiting for China to come across the line there. Also out on track, coming up to complete their single flying lap in this first sector of qualifying.
China across the line. Oh, that's disappointing. It's a 1:18.1. New Zealand's just gone quickest. New Zealand with Chris van der Drift. What about France? Watch Nicolas Prost. He goes quickest.
16.164. So the young Frenchman again showing the form he showed on Friday. Very confident, but just in a nice, quiet way. Here we are on board with Switzerland. Neil Yarni. So the Swiss car is on a flying lap. This is the beginning. He was actually his sector time in the third sector, where he would start the lap, again, non-surprisingly, quickest of everyone.
Yeah, he's looking fast, as we would have expected. He had a little bit of an off this morning in practice, nothing wrong, he didn't do any damage, he just went through the gravel trap, and it was this sort of chicane where you've got to try and use a tiny bit of curve, not too much, it's a big steep curve there, coming out of that final section now to cross the line. This surely is going to be the fastest time so far. What's it going to be? A 1:15.683, a very rapid time, and Neil Yarni takes Switzerland fastest.
And that's the fastest lap of all the weekend we've seen so far. We did get a single lap just under that 1:16 barrier by the Netherlands, but that's well and truly into the meat and veg of the 1:15s.
Great lap then from the reigning title holders, but what can Clivio Piccioni do? Last night he was in the boxing ring being presented to Don King, the famous boxing promoter. Well, let's see what he can do, fighting his way around this Chengdu circuit. He has a pretty smooth style. At the moment, though, he's 6/10 down on that new mark that has been set by Switzerland.
Well, that 6/10 would see him somewhere around about Australia, probably a very high 1:16, maybe a 1:17.0. Depends how he gets through these final 2 turns, 12 and 13. Slides the car under power on the edge of the 13, and then the drive across the start-finish line.
So is this going to challenge those top few cars across the line? He goes 4th. That's a very respectable effort. Good effort also from New Zealand, as I mentioned a moment ago. Chris van der Drift, who's been struggling a little bit to get pace out of the New Zealand car, currently sitting 3rd, and that's not bad at all behind Switzerland and France. Now, India. Narain Karthikeyan, great to see Team India here this weekend. They weren't able to get to Zandvoort. He now goes on to a flying lap, just less than a minute and a half to go in this session, and we're still to see some of the other heavy hitters come out. Now, he could potentially be a threat for the front row, John.
Oh, absolutely, on new tyres with the experience. He'll use all the racetrack. Bumps, what bumps? Car moving around? No problem at all. That's the style of Narain Karthikeyan as he comes through turn 4. Then accelerates hard. There's a curve to the left. Ignore that. Down to the braking. Well, look again. Look how much of the racetrack he is off on the curves again, but gathers the car up through turn 6, drops downhill. Water on the inside, then through 7.
Great Britain are not far behind him. You can see the clock ticking away on your screen there. That's because Danny Watts is only a few seconds behind Narain Karthikeyan. And remember, of course, Great Britain and India took the 2 last wins in the final races of season 3 at Brands Hatch. There is Danny Watts, and I tell you what, his split times are better than Narain Karthikeyan's, yes, but not quite as quick as of Neil Yarni's.
No, but right now GB is probably, yes, if they've maintained that 0.16 of a second, capable of getting on to what would be second place, displacing France, but India further back.
Let's see where he gets. Tell you what, Netherlands going quickly as well. Let's see where India goes 4th, so it's Switzerland fastest, France 2nd, New Zealand 3rd. Great Britain crossed the line, goes 2nd. Good effort, first effort from Danny Watts, his first ever qualifying performance, and there's the smiles there. But what about Robert Doornbos? He is flying here, John. We could see fastest time for the Netherlands. Is he going to beat Switzerland? Cross the line he goes, yes! Great first effort from the new man at Team Netherlands this weekend, Robert Doornbos. South Africa going 5th quickest, but it's the Dutch car fastest.
Well, Robert Doornbos is the kind of race driver they come along from time to time who is a pure 100% race driver. He hasn't got any experience in the car. As you watch Ireland, Adam Carroll, the last car, I think, about to take the flag, and goes quickest, 1:15.423. Adam Carroll's got provisional pole.
Oh, good lap from Adam Carroll. I was just looking at the split times and they were looking very healthy. But Portugal also going pretty well. Not fast enough, I think, to take Ireland's time, but he's going to put himself up in the top 5, maybe. Let's just see. Yep, 5th place for Portugal. So, Philippe Albuquerque displacing France on the closing moments of that session. And let's quickly tell you who's up there. It's Ireland fastest, Adam Carroll. Yet to take a pole position, Team Ireland. But remember, they've still got to do it in the second 15-minute session to try and take pole for the sprint race here. The Dutch are 2nd quickest. The difference between the two, 69 thousandths of a second. It's tiny, tiny differences. Switzerland 3rd fastest then. So Neil Yarni's earlier run, interestingly, Switzerland sent their car out quite early in that session. Ireland did what you would tend to expect to be a good strategy normally when you've got a slightly slippery circuit, and that is leave your man waiting in the pits until the very end of the session. I think they timed that very well.
That was ideal. I mean, Adam Carroll, he struggled a bit this morning, couldn't find the balance, couldn't find the grip. New tyres, bit of work, go back maybe to where they were on Friday, and the results are clear. 1:15.423.
Oh, and off has gone Team Italy. That's Edoardo Piscopo.
Well, he's recorded a time, he's gone off on the in lap.
Now, how on earth has he managed that?
Because he probably was coming in as quickly as he could to try and learn something. And whereabouts has he gone off? I think, is that up at turn 8? I think no, it's not a turn.
Yeah, turn.
No, it's not. It's coming out of 4.
Right. Well, we'll have to check that.
He's coming. Hold on. Let's look at it the other way. He's coming out of turn 9, and for some reason,
yeah, it's just gone straight on.
Gone straight on.
Left front broken. I think before he even went off there, you could see it flapping around.
Yes. So on the exit of turn 9, which is a combination of 2 corners, suddenly the car goes off and you can see the left front wheel pointing the wrong way. And that's unexpected.
So after the first 15-minute session, Adam Carroll's on top for Team Ireland. Netherlands right up there with new driver Robert Doornbos. Switzerland up there as expected in 3rd. Danny Watts of Great Britain 4th. Portugal and France are well up. South Africa and New Zealand are next. India and Monaco complete the top 10. Australia, Brazil and Lebanon down to 13th. And then we've got Malaysia way down in 14th. Italy 15th. USA, Marco Andretti having his first experience, finding it pretty tough in that one lap. He's 16th ahead of Mexico, China, Indonesia and Korea. So there we have that first 15-minute session. It goes quickly, doesn't it? 15 minutes and fairly furious activity throughout. Ireland timing it beautifully, going fastest.
But what goes even quicker is the 5-minute break between these sessions, and they've got to get the car, that Italian car, back. And before we get into that second session, this car will have to be returned to the pits. So stay with it, Edoardo Piscopo, because if you're not with the car, it gets back, you don't. Whatever the problem is, they can work on the car hopefully get him fit to go out into the second session.
Right, well, Eduardo's got out of his car. I think Diana's got some news for us from the Italian pit. Diana, what can you tell us?
Yes, I'm just down here at the pits, and they reckon that there's a problem with the front left suspension, a bit of a failure there. So they're just having a look, having a chat amongst themselves at the moment. Obviously, they'll be investigating that a bit further.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Diana. We're going to try and have another look at that in a moment, but certainly as he went off, it was a very strange place. Unless you had a mechanical failure, you wouldn't normally go off there, would you?
No, you wouldn't. I mean, the corner in itself, particularly the exit of the corner, all the load is releasing. There's virtually no load, so something in the left front has gone awry. There's looking into the team garage. Piercarlo Ginzani, the seat holder for Team Italy, looking at the screen and just wondering what the problem was. Something totally unexpected. The car will be brought back, but where it is, it's going to be dragged out of the gravel. Everybody will have to remain in their cars as we look into the Team Netherlands garage.
Yes, and what an impressive first run that is by Robert Doornbos. Robert Doornbos, the 27-year-old from Rotterdam, who has raced through the ranks of single-seater racing. He started relatively late in his career. He was a tennis player in his younger sporting days, and so he didn't have the sort of karting background that so many have had. But nonetheless, he's done a lot of serious single-seater racing, including Formula One, including champ cars, so he's got the experience. There is Nicholas Prost, now 6th fastest, not bad. I think he'll be a little disappointed with that because over the course of the weekend he's been pretty rapid. But nonetheless, bearing in mind he's less experienced than quite a few out there, that's not a bad effort at all.
No, again, went probably a little bit earlier than the few front runners that waited until the last possible moment. But again, for Nicholas Prost and others that are not familiar with the format, just go out, do the run, see where you sit, and then you've got another run once this car has been cleared from the gravel and look to improve.
So Eduardo Piscopo waiting for his car to be recovered. There is the man that set the fastest time. Very impressive stuff from Adam Carroll. We had James interviewed Mark Gallagher, the seat holder, earlier on this morning, and at that time Adam was struggling a bit. He was off a couple of times, but as Mark explained to us, the tyres were a bit warm by that stage. Let's listen in to what they've been talking about on the radio.
Well done, Adam. If I can have your comments, please. Yeah, car was good. I think this circuit, like you think you can push a lot more, but then I think if you do, it'll just bite you in that. I think it's a bit to come out just on the brake. Just had a couple of scrappy exits, but through all the fast and slow and stuff, the car was really good. I think the balance is spot on, really. I think I can just try and get a better lap out of it.
Well, there's an unusual thing, John. A happy driver.
Yeah, nothing too technical in Adam's description of how the lap was, feeling maybe he could sneak out another 10th or 2 out under braking. But he did point out, and this was very clear this morning, this circuit doesn't necessarily appreciate pushing very hard. The track is still relatively green. We haven't got yet what I would call a full racing line developing, and the problem is if you don't stay on that line, you run slightly wide, particularly into that turn one, which caught out so many people this morning. You've just got to keep the car in. Eventually it will clear up, but in the meantime, drivers are being slightly cautious on the entry into turn one.
So Marco Andretti just waiting to come back out. There's a bit of a delay, and James is down there. James, you've been in this situation several times in qualifying in A1. There's a bit of a delay. What's going through the drivers' minds at the moment?
Well, normally, Ben, in qualifying, there's such a routine. It is the first qualifying session, set time, set amount of break, and then back into the next session. So with this break, it's giving the drivers a little bit more time to think about things, and that can be very dangerous for a driver. Sometimes they start overanalyzing. These guys really just need to get into a routine, get into a rhythm, and get these qualifying laps pumped out.
Absolutely right. Yeah, well, thanks, James. You've been there in an A1GP car. You know exactly what it's like, and there's John Martin. He's got a little bit of focus there, certainly, in his eyes. He needs to improve because at the moment they're 11th, but nonetheless, that's not a bad effort for Team Australia. They'll be looking to try and squeeze into the top 10. A few places to be gained.
Yeah, and bearing in mind Australia were the first car out on the circuit, first nation to record a time. When you compare what Ireland did at the very end of the session, clearly the lap did improve, the lap cleaned up. John Martin, in a sense, playing catch-up from that little misdemeanor he had this morning when he damaged the nose of that Team Australia car, and probably a little bit in the back foot. So I think that all told was a good effort from the young Australian driver. And into the second session, maybe his confidence will be lifted and he can sneak up into the top 10.
Well, just inside that top 10 is Cliffio Piccioni. Oh, look, we've got a local hare as well.
Well, that'll make somebody's dinner tonight if they can catch it.
So So that's the first time we've seen a hare. We've seen other various other bits of wildlife around, but it's escaped to safety, I think.
One of the marshals did spot it, and he was after it.
maybe. It better watch itself. But it's great to see. We've got a lot of enthusiastic people watching from the sidelines here at Chengdu, getting a first ever view, I'm sure, of cars that are quite this powerful, quite this fast. Speeds of some 270 kilometers per hour down the main straight here. And of course, got a couple of weeks' time, it's going to be off to Malaysia, as the visor sticker says there on Satrio Hermanto's car. And we go to Sepang, a track, of course, that we've been to many times now with A1GP.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally looking forward to that race. I think probably of all the races that we're going to go to before the Christmas break, the layout of Sepang and the nature of the new A1GP car powered by Ferrari, I think we're going to see for the first time the full potential of this car. I mean, a much different circuit. It is a Grand Prix circuit with very, very fast corners, and the aerodynamics of this new car, we know from testing reports, is pretty impressive.
Let's get back down to the pits. Diana is with Jan Lammers.
Yeah, and that first session out the way, Robert did a very good job.
Yeah, very good. I'm very pleased. Obviously, we set the standards pretty high in Zandvoort in qualifying, so it was a tough act for him to follow up. But also, we seem to be locked in with Ireland. This morning we were within 1/10, and now again within 1/10, so competition is very strong.
So you won't want to come out the garage too quickly because you're right next door to each other.
Yeah, well, this first session we came out, we crossed the line, there was 1 minute to go. So we thought we can leave it a bit later. So it will be the last sort of 50 seconds, 40 seconds that we cross the line.
What was Robert's feedback to you after that session?
That he went out and we were behind Lebanon, so he had to slow down a little bit to leave a gap, which is not ideal because you like to leave the pit and be straight on it, because then you know about the car and you've got your pressures and temperatures of the tires maximum, and then you can really attack. So he left out a little bit on the first sector, he feels. So I'm not sure now the tires will be used that we use. So I don't think we can improve on the first run. But with the next session, you know, session 3 and 4, with 2 times new tires, we should be able to improve a little bit.
Thanks, Jan.
Thank you very much, Diana. And interesting what he was talking about there, John, in terms of strategy and tactics and building up tyre temperature. Of course, it's going to be a very different situation when we go to the heat and humidity of Malaysia, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what Jan was saying is that because of the circumstances of Chengdu, the track is a new track to us. It's not a track that's in use a great deal. So tyre temperature, pressures, critical to the performance of a car. So on your out lap, as you prepare to go on the flying lap, you want to really go as hard as you can to get both those values to their respective areas. In Sepang in Malaysia, because the ambient is so much hotter and a lot more humidity as well, then you may not want to, and also a longer lap. So you may not want to go at it quite as hard as early as you would have done here. And I think you'll see different approaches to the particular problems in Malaysia when we get there.
So there's still a bit of a delay to get the Italian car moved out of the way. It's because they can't tow it, obviously, because of the broken steering arm. I think it's a steering arm, certainly something broken in that left front suspension. Again, you can see the front wheels pointing in slightly opposite directions. So whatever it is that's gone wrong with the car means they've got to carry it back rather than tow it back. So that's just causing a little bit of a delay. Philippe Albuquerque for Team Portugal there. 5th quickest, good first session for Philippe Albuquerque, and he's got to try and see if he can capitalise on that, perhaps improve slightly. Great Britain is his nearest target. The gap between the two cars is a little bit, it's about 0.4 of a second from GBR back to Portugal. Interestingly, the top 4 cars covered by, 3 3/4 of a second, so all very close. We expected it to be tight, and sure enough, it is very close between the front runners.
And I think once the drivers and engineers get accustomed to running in fresh rubber, we're going to see that gap actually close down. And in fact, if you go down to the top 14 this morning, we're covered by just a second. Yeah. So things will close up as we get further into these 3 remaining qualifying segments.
So let's go and hear from the team manager for Team GB, Paul Bellringer.
Paul, you happy with that session?
Yeah, it's gone quite well, really. 4th was probably, if we're honest, better than we'd hoped for with the limited running we've had with the car. Danny still thinks there's more to come from him. We're pretty sure we can find more within the car. So the second session, we're hoping to go quicker.
Everything out there working well for Dan?
Yeah, it seems to be. Like I say, we're playing catch up a little bit. First time we've run the car was yesterday, so we've still got a bit of learning to do, a bit of catching up to do on some of the others. But I think we can get in amongst them.
Pretty impressive so far.
Yeah, we're pretty pleased. it's worked quite well. The boys have been working really hard. We're doing all nights to finish the car. So yeah, it's going according to plan at the moment.
What about this delay here? Is that making much difference to you?
Not really. It's just it breaks your rhythm a little bit. You get so used to the rhythm of doing a run, a short stop run again. But it's the same for everyone. It's hopefully we'll cope with it better than they will.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks.
Thanks, Diana. Yes, the boys have certainly been working hard. As Paul mentioned, they did an all-nighter. That was on Thursday night. They finished here at 5 o'clock in the morning. They did go back to the hotel, but no time to sleep, John. All they had time to do was have a shower, a bit of breakfast, and they came straight back again.
Absolutely. I mean, the team, as has Mexico, for example, worked tirelessly to get their cars prepared. Interestingly, speaking to Danny this morning in his race program this summer, he was racing in the Porsche Super Cup, and they get 2 sets of tyres for their practice, qualifying and race. And the tyre that they used for that was literally at its best on that one flying lap. So your first lap on the tyre gave you the time. And it's not unlike what is required here in A1GP. You've got an out lap and a flying lap, and you've got to make best use of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you should be feeling good. Let's go and hear now from James Robinson of Team Switzerland.
James Robinson, obviously you guys went out a bit earlier, quick early on, got pipped at the end. How did it go for you?
Well, obviously we're very worried about red flags here. That's the real danger. So obviously just wanted to get a banker in first run, and we'll build on that.
So knowing that he's been quick, he's got a relatively decent time in the bag. You're going to wait for a little bit longer, try and go for the ultimate lap at the end of the session?
I think you're guessing what we're doing, but you might not be wrong.
Fair enough. Best of luck.
All right, thanks, no problem.
Thanks, James. James Robinson, always a master strategist himself, and that was probably pretty wise in terms of getting a banker lap. In fact, a red flag wasn't necessary, even though the Italian car went off. That was right at the end of the session, but if a car had gone off before that, then several teams might have been in trouble and not got their lap in.
Yes, well, that's the gamble. If you want to go early, you go early, but you know the track's maybe not going to be quite at its best. In that 15-minute period of qualifying, it does change. You go and wait until the end, and you think, I've timed it to perfection, and all of a sudden something beyond your control has occurred, and you don't get your chance to do that lap. So it is a gamble. That's the pressure of qualifying.
Narain Karthikeyan hasn't been racing during the summer season, so he's got to dial himself in pretty quickly. The car, again, another one that was only completed here at the Chengdu circuit, so he's really getting up to speed as quickly as possible in that car. So far he's 9th fastest. Back with Philippe Albuquerque, he did race at Zandvoort. They got their car fairly late in Zandvoort, but they were able to race there, so he's at least got that little bit of experience behind him. I'm sure that's helping.
Yeah, he's one of these very talented sportsmen, great at football and great racing driver. He was probably, as a child, one of those irritating children that was also academically very bright. The sort of kid you wanted to punch behind the bicycle shed.
He is quite a bright lad, isn't he? And there's no doubt there's a sort of he's got that sort of jump to his step and a quickness of mind, and you can just see in him that ability to drag a quick time out of a car, and he's done it pretty well so far here today. 5th fastest. We saw some great podium finishes from him at the end of last year, and we're expecting to see more of the same this year with the new car as well. Now, Team Australia were the first out, if you remember, in the first qualifying segment. I wonder if they'll do that again. Maybe Diana can ask Alan Jones.
Alan, you were first out on that session. Are you relatively happy with where you ended up?
Well, I don't think you really should be happy until you're at least in the top 3, but our plan went a little bit awry. We went out for the very reason that we thought we'd try and bank a lap in case something like this happened. Unfortunately, it happened about 5 minutes too late. We were hoping that we would get out there and do a quick lap, and then somebody would spin off or go into the gravel, which Italy did do, and then they'd red flag it or the yellows would come out, and the one that we'd put in the bank would be good enough to put us in the top 3 or 4, but it happened, but too late.
Now, what about this session? There's been a fair bit of a delay. Has that affected you?
No, not really. I don't think so. It'll probably be a bit more heat in the tyres with the warmers on them. We'll probably stick to the same strategy, go out early again and hopefully get a nice, good, clean lap in and hope for some yellows.
Thanks, Alan.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Diana. Thanks very much. Well, they've got to think about when they're going to send him out, and obviously their plan to send him out early didn't quite work this time.
No, it didn't, but I think they did the right thing. Get him out early, get that confidence built back up again. And there we see the top 6 times.
Yeah, indeed, Ireland fastest from Netherlands, Switzerland, Great Britain, Portugal and France. Nicolas Prost just a fraction slower than Philippe Albuquerque, potentially on a 3rd row starting position as it stands at the moment. Remember, when we get into this second segment of qualifying, it is the fastest lap from either the first or second segment that will determine your grid position for the sprint race. So basically, you've just got to see how people, if they improve, if they don't manage to improve and revert to this one, Then just got to see how that lines them up for the sprint race, which will have a rolling start. The feature race qualifying, then the next 2 15-minute sessions.
Yes, and of course we have the standing start, the rolling start always being very exciting. The grid tends to get very compacted, and as ever with power boost, and I can assure you from, well, certainly Danny Watts assured me, and I would like to pass it on to our audience, that power boost this year with the Ferrari engine really is a boost, to the extent of it being about worth an extra 10 k's per hour down the main straight. Snap.
A bit of money on that game by the looks of things. But
a great gambling nation, China.
Indeed it is. And they're focused on their own sport, while we're focusing on the sport on track at the moment. Well, not on track just yet, but it will be fairly soon. We're just waiting for that Italian car to be brought back to the pits once again. Now, New Zealand have qualified provisionally in 8th place at the moment. Hinch has caught up with David Sears to see what they make of it.
Here with David Sears. Chris struggled a little bit in practice, but so far he's done a pretty good job in Q1.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's getting better and better. I don't think, like a lot of drivers, he didn't like the bumps to begin with. No, he just said, forget about the bumps, get on with it.
Now, as he's new to the one-lap qualifying format, do you think he might be able to improve as the session goes on?
Damn well hope so.
Fair enough. Well, best of luck.
Thank you.
Competitors as ever. And, of course, New Zealand had such a strong start to the season, John, with Earl Bamber, and they want to back that up with more points here.
Yeah, such an understated team principal or support to the Team New Zealand, David Sears, explaining it as it is, and really, you know, cold shower if you don't get the job done type thing.
Absolutely right. Well, David's been there himself. He was a very capable driver himself, and he doesn't take many excuses from the drivers that drive for him nowadays.
No, and it does help if you've had that experience firsthand of being a racing driver, understanding the pressures, and it works both ways, because sometimes you need to be a little bit tough with the driver, other times you've got to maybe put your arm around him and lift him if he needs that kind of support.
So a lot of interest around this Chengdu circuit as A1GP comes to a 4th different Chinese circuit. We've been to Shanghai, of course, the massive modern facility that is Shanghai. We've been to Beijing, the street race in that first season. We went to Zhuhai last year, and here we are now in Chengdu in southwestern China. And as we mentioned, Marco Andretti is making his debut here this weekend. Let's hear from Team USA now.
Yes, I'm with Paul Anthony, Team USA. Paul, how are things going for you? Obviously, probably not that session. Probably didn't get the quickest one you'd hoped for.
No, that's not quite what we're capable of. But it's the first one of the season for Marco, so we got to start somewhere.
How's Marco doing?
Oh, he's doing all right. He's kept it on the island, and we keep going better and better. So we're optimistic for sure.
This must be quite a change for him, being involved in this sort of championship after racing in the USA.
Oh yeah, I think this is totally different. Not only the venue, but the series itself and everything else. But yeah, it's very, very different.
What's been the thing that's been most prominent then?
Well, the one-lap qualifying is a steep learning curve, and you have to do it before you can actually gain experience at it. Nothing else matters. So that's what takes the time to learn. So here we are.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've just had interesting news on our timing screen that Q2 session is cancelled, John. Now that means basically, presumably, that the lineup for the sprint race will therefore be what we have just seen from Q1, and that means that Ireland will have their first ever pole position.
Yes, decision made that in the interest of getting the show back on the road, time lost with that difficulty of getting the Italian car back to the pits means that Ireland have been gifted, having done a brilliant job in doing the quickest time in the first segment, 1 minute 15.4. So Ireland and the Netherlands will be on the front row of the grid for the sprint race.
That is very interesting. So Ireland take their first ever pole for the sprint race, and Netherlands will line up alongside them on the front row with new driver Robert Dornbos, and Switzerland are going to be up there as well. Now that means that we'll be going straight into Q3, and that means that we'll have 2 more sessions left, 2 15-minute segments, which will then determine the grid for the feature race. But the first time that I think this has happened, we haven't had this situation before, but you know, there's always time for something new to happen. And in this case, it's helped Ireland. There'll be a few nations out there, of course, who'll be, well, a little bit upset, but that's the way it is.
Welcome back to China, Chengdu, the race venue for A1GP this race weekend. Unprecedented situation out in Chengdu. Session 2 of qualifying has been cancelled. That's with the difficulties on getting Team Italy's car off the track after they had an accident. So session 1 means that that will determine the grid for the sprint race, which means Adam Carroll gets his first pole. Team Ireland no doubt couldn't be happier with the outcome. Let's take you over to the track once more, because session 3 has now got underway. John Watson and Ben Edwards will take you through it.
But by sending him out early and getting a lap in early, as they did in the first segment of qualifying for the sprint race, they got a solid 11th place for Australia. He can maybe sneak into the top 10 in this, the first of the 2 qualifying segments for the feature race. And then once we go into that final qualifying segment, may well go out a little bit later, but they just want to get something in the bin, as it were, to ensure that they're not going to be bothered by potential stoppages through yellow or red flaggings.
So across the line and onto a lap goes the Indonesian car of Satrio Hermanto into turn 1. You can see the movement in the car. That's the low grip surface that is characteristic of this Chengdu circuit. There isn't a high level of grip, and the drivers have got to allow for that.
Yeah, and that's why it's imperative on your out lap that you really get on with the program as early as possible. And even leaving the pit lane, you want to be standing on it, putting energy into the tyres, getting the heat, retaining the heat that the tyres would have enjoyed with the tyre warming blankets. And again, for someone like Marco Andretti, he's not familiar with going out and qualifying with preheated tyres. In America, you do it with tyres that are at ambient temperature.
That's right, so something else that he's having to learn. And, well, USA quite a long way down the list in the first qualifying. Let's see whether they can recover some of that ground for the feature race. Meanwhile, Indonesia's Satrio Hermanto continues around the lap through turn 10, into the long looping right-hander at turn 11, and down to the final chicane, where you've got to try and avoid clipping the curbs too tightly. It's a bigger curb than it looks on screen. It really does could do some damage, at least if you clip it wrong. He's out of the final corner, and let's see how this time compares as he comes across the line in the 17s. No, he's not. A 1:18.619.
So that's the time for Indonesia. Expect Australia to beat that time. Australia were very good on that first run.
Yeah, here he is.
Yes, John Martin completes the twisty section of the track now, just flat out, with all the 600 horsepower he has under his right foot.
So the time, a 1:16.6. Now that's got to be competitive, I would think. We've seen them in the 1:15s, of course. He was just outside the top 10 in qualifying for the sprint race. That's a reasonable effort, I think, from John Martin. But now they have to sit back and wait and see what everybody else gets up to. There are still 5 3/4 minutes left of this session, the first of the 2 sessions that will determine the feature race lineup. And there's Nicola Prost getting ready to come out, not just coming onto circuit as yet, though. There's Chris van der Drift for Team New Zealand. Let's see what he can do here.
He's just about to go on to his lap, in fact, so New Zealand starting the lap when they come across the start-finish line. Chris van der Drift, again, clear track, no traffic. And for those drivers that are new to A1GP in a qualifying situation, that clearly has got to be the smart thing to do. And they come to the 4th and final segment of qualifying, then they can maybe opt to go a bit later, but then there was the problem of traffic and just getting caught up with somebody else's in lap. Better just to send your less experienced drivers out and hope that they can do a good clean lap.
So Chris van der Drift, the 22-year-old from Hamilton in New Zealand, just locking up that right front, then getting on the power with this 600 brake horsepower, 4.5 litre Ferrari V8 power unit. Again, he locks up the fronts.
Again, the New Zealand car looking to bump quite aggressively over the bumps in the entry into turn 5. You watch maybe Switzerland and others, they're staying more to the centre of the road, avoiding the severity of the bumps now through turn 8 and then the exit of turn 9. Again, that ratchet effect as you go right across the bumps, braking downhill into turn 10, and then the final long turn 11 that seemingly never ends.
The nation that has finished runner-up the last 2 years in A1GP World Cup of Motorsport. Earl Bamber drove brilliantly at Zandvoort in the first meeting of this season 4, and Chris van der Drift with a fantastic CV behind him. He's the Formula Masters champion of 2008. Let's see where he goes. It's not going to be quickest. It's a 1:17.2, and that's a full half a second slower than the Australian car. And they'll be a little disappointed. There's Chris Gaughan, the experienced race engineer, who of course worked so well with Johnny Reed last year.
Marco Andretti so comes down into turn 5 again over the bumps, getting accustomed to running on the warm tyres. The single lap qualifying, strange car, different engine, everything. You couldn't have a more vertical climb than Marco Andretti, and this is all going to add to his experience when he goes back into a summer program within the family team they will see the benefit on the road races that they enjoy in North America.
Absolutely. He's delivered some reasonable results in the road races in IRL. As I mentioned, he was 5th at Watkins Glen earlier this year in IRL. He's had great results on the ovals. He's had that 2nd place at Indy 500 you've mentioned, John. There's no denying the fact the guy's quick. He's still only 21 years old, so there's still plenty of time for him to learn. New qualifying format here. Let's see where he... That's great. He's gone quickest. Would you believe it? A 1:16.5. Marco Andretti has gone quickest for the moment. Still plenty of cars to go, but that's great effort.
China goes 4th, so host nation not happy still. 1:17.325. That's Team GBR with what? We've got just under 3 minutes of the session remaining. So Team GBR opting to go out slightly earlier than they could do if they wanted to really roll the dice. We go back to Brazil. They come down through turn 9 and the drop into 10.
Yeah, this newly liveried Brazilian car. It is Brazil, honestly, and it's all silver now, but with the Dayglow front and rear wings. And it's Felipe Guimarães who drove for the team last time out at Zandvoort. He's a youngster, very inexperienced compared to some of the drivers that we've seen in the Brazilian car over recent years, but there's a lot of faith, a lot of belief in this youngster that he's going to deliver as we go through the season. It's a good time. Let's see what it is. Yes, he's gone quickest. So Brazil on top from USA and Australia at the moment, with 8 cars having set a time in this session and just 2 minutes remaining. So things beginning to hot up now. Remember, we're in the first of 2 segments of qualifying for the feature race, but there is the team that has taken pole for the sprint race. That was Team Ireland just coming onto circuit.
And at the same time, GBR is out, Switzerland's out, Netherlands out, and South Africa out.
Yeah, there's Robert Dornbos for the Netherlands. He was quick in that first session, ended up 2nd on the sprint race grid. Team France, meanwhile, Nicolas Prost on the attack, and he's on his hot lap at the moment. He's slightly down on the splits, though, of Team Brazil, so doesn't look as though he's going to beat the Brazilian time, but nonetheless, it could still be pretty fast from Nicolas Prost, son of former 4 times world champion Alain Prost. He's certainly got the look about him of Alain, but has he got all the attributes of that famous world champion? He's been driving well so far this weekend.
But that 0.2 of a second down is not going to be good enough to see him, in my view, eclipse the time of Team Brazil. That's a great run from Felipe Guimarães to put himself provisionally quickest.
Let's see what it is for France. 3rd quickest, so it's now Brazil 1, USA 2, France 3rd, but we've still got people like Great Britain, Switzerland, and the others to set their times. Great Britain on a lap, and he's up on the first split. So can he now go quickest? So 2/3 of the lap still to complete, and Danny Watts, new to the race situation for Team GBR, but with a wealth of experience behind him, John, in Formula 3, particular British Formula 3, and then, as you were mentioning earlier, the Porsche Super Cup more recently.
Yes, and Danny really enjoying his opportunity to represent Great Britain, and look, he's looking forward to the prospect. Look, 0.7 of a second up. Massive amount of gain for Team GBR, and this time, assuming he gets through these final curves, without problem, we'll see him provisionally quickest by what would look to me to be a significant amount of time.
He's out of the final chicane. He's just got to floor the throttle now as he comes up towards the line. Switzerland's on a quick lap as well, but this is a mega lap from Danny Watts. Let's see what the time. It's a 1:15.3. That's the fastest time of the weekend by a long shot. And Great Britain takes provisional pole, but wait for Switzerland, wait for some of the other front runners like Ireland in particular.
Switzerland coming across the start finish line. The flag is out. Switzerland goes 2nd to GBR.
2nd quickest for Neil Yarni, so it's Great Britain 1st, Switzerland 2nd. Where is Ireland? Well, they're on a lap at the moment, and it's a good lap from Ireland. I tell you, Adam Carroll is flying here today. Netherlands across the line 3rd. South Africa goes 4th. So Robert Dornbos isn't going to be on the front row provisionally, not yet. Remember, there's another session to come, but this is another great lap from Adam Carroll. This could take pole position away from Great Britain. Is it going to be quite enough? I'm not sure. The second splits were very close. Cross the line, not quite. Look at that, 31,000ths of a second slower than Danny Watts. Adam Carroll goes 2nd quickest for Team Ireland. There's another session still to come. Portugal on track, and this is a good lap from Portugal. It's not quite, well, it might be, it's going to be close, you know, to both Great Britain and Ireland. This is going to put Portugal up there somewhere. Great Britain currently quickest. Where does Portugal go? 3rd. So he beats Switzerland. He's behind Great Britain and Ireland, but another great run from Philippe Albuquerque puts the Portuguese car 3rd. Switzerland are pushed back to 4th. And once again, Looks like the benefit is with those who've gone out at the end of the session. So does that mean everyone sits around in the final qualifying segment, waits to see what everyone else is doing, and then charges out there? Then you've got the problem, of course, of getting caught in traffic. But that yellow helmeted figure is Danny Watson. At the moment, he's on provisional pole.
So great drive by Danny. I mean, really confirming. Oh, be careful, don't swing too far right as cars come in, Danny. But really confirming his ability, and we know from his earlier years in single-seater racing he was one of the leading contenders in junior formula in Great Britain, but never really given the opportunity in the senior and certainly the more powerful formulas to show his ability, but he's done it here and with tons.
So at the moment it's Great Britain on top from Ireland by just 31 thousandths of a second, and look how close Portugal is behind as well. Then there's a little gap to Switzerland, Netherlands, South Africa, Brazil. That's good stuff from the 17-year-old Felipe Guimarães. And look at the Marco Andretti. I tell you what, talk about a quick learner. He's up to 8th. And Faraz Fawzi's done well. He's to 9th as well, ahead of France, Australia, Lebanon and Monaco. Monaco outside the top 10. Then it's Mexico going well. David Garza having his first real run in the car here today. He's ahead of India, New Zealand, China, Indonesia, Korea, and of course no time set by Italy because that car was damaged earlier on, broken front suspension, so no time set for him. Well, we've got a very exciting final session building up here, John.
Yeah, I mean, great runs from Ireland, consolidating the performance from that sprint qualifying. Didn't get the pole, but provisionally, GB have got it. But two outstanding performances to me, a little bit further down the top 10. Brazil in 7th and USA in 8th. And I think those are standout performances in this first qualifying segment of the feature race.
We've got a little pause before the final segments get underway, but certainly no delays in prospect this time. And it'll be basically about the fight to take pole position. Great Britain, not much of a margin over Ireland. Remember, it's the fastest lap. You don't add the two laps together. It's purely the fastest lap from either session that counts. And there in the Portuguese pit, they'll be taking those tyres off. They've done their job for that session. There'll be another brand new set of Michelin tyres going on there.
And I'd like to think that this final qualifying segment, we might see a further improvement in qualifying time, because what we're getting now is effectively 3 straight sessions on new tyres, not having to do the one of the 3 on a set of used tyres, which drivers, of course, automatically will discount as being something of any real significance.
28-year-old Danny Watts, he comes from Aylesbury. He's won a few titles in his time. He was the Formula First champion all the way back in 1998. Well, that's one little connection I've got with him, John.
I thought Formula First had disappeared, but 1998, I didn't know it was still around.
It was, yeah, and he was a British Formula Renault champion as well. Of course, that was a title that certain Lewis Hamilton went on to win later on. But British Formula 3, he raced in British Formula 3 for some 5 or 6 years. I remember Thruxton in 2006, he did a one-off race. He hadn't been racing all season long in F3, which you know how competitive that is. And he came in at Thruxton and he just blew them all away and won the race. It was remarkable.
Well, there's a lot of young drivers around the world. I mean, certainly in Great Britain, there are many of them. If we look down to the tyres, and you can see a little bit of scuff on the surface of that tyre. That's Switzerland. They haven't opted yet to fit. Well, the right front's coming off now. The left front has been removed. But so many young drivers, just they need these one opportunity. I have to say, in my career, I got that one opportunity in 1972. And once you get it, you get the momentum going again and your career rekindles.
We're preparing for the final qualifying segment here at Chengdu, and we've got a fantastic fight in prospect between the likes of Great Britain, Ireland, Portugal and Switzerland, perhaps the Netherlands as well. Those seem to be the dominant nations in qualifying here at the moment.
So the track is open, and there'll be 10 minutes of this qualifying segment before we can confirm who will start from the front row and who it will be who's got that pole position. The time to beat, 1 minute 15.325, resides with Team GBR and Robbie Kerr, and there's one nation and certainly one driver who will not be very happy starting in 4th position as he looks. I'm not quite sure he's looking at there, whether he's got something on his little screen.
Yeah, he's probably studying the times or the splits between on the various parts of the track, perhaps. Just trying to learn a little bit more before he goes back out.
Some of the support around the racetrack, and there we again see the top 6 times.
Yeah, Great Britain up there from Ireland, very, very close in the time. Switzerland 4th at the moment, but remember they did go out a bit earlier in that session, and it does depend on when you go out. The track is a little bit cleaner at the end of the 10-minute session, and that's what they'll be hoping that they will be able to gain as they come out onto the circuit. You go out at the final moment, but if you do so, you're at a risk of being delayed by a yellow flag. So coming out onto the circuit straight away, it is Korea's Jinwoo Hwang, who is first on the circuit, and at the moment Korea are last but one. They're not last because of course Italy didn't manage to set a time at all in that segment of qualifying. Whether that car's going to be repaired or not, I'm not sure. It would be great if Eduardo Piscopo is able to come back out, but we'll have to wait and see a little bit later on. Indonesia coming out onto circuit as well, and Satrio Hermanto, who at the moment sits 18th, just one place ahead of Korea. The gap between the two cars at the moment, it's a fairly big gap. It's just over a second, in fact, between those two cars, so you would expect Satrio Hermanto to maintain that advantage. But the other front runners, or the guys who are really going to be fighting for pole position, well, they're all sitting in the pits. A few setup changes going on the Monaco car there around the rear damper area. And meanwhile, a bit of focus, a bit of thought going on. There's Felipe Guimarães, the youngster who's qualified very well provisionally at the moment, 7th quickest for Team Brazil.
Yeah, that don't say two standout performances, and that was clearly one of them. As we go back to Korea, so a difficult job for Jinwoo Hwang to just find, it's the lack of experience in a powerful single-seater car. Fundamentally did a good job in the race in Holland in the rain. Fell off a couple of times in Friday practice. Just needs track time and seat time.
That's right. It's all about experience for Jinwoo at the moment as he builds up the level of something like this in A1GP. The car just moving around a bit under braking. He just about gathers it together, but you could see the work that was going on at the steering wheel there to keep it pointing in a straight line. He has had one or two spins so far. That was neater and tidier there. But remember, this is a big step up from most of the stuff he's done before. He's done some Formula 3, he's done some GT racing more recently, but he's relatively inexperienced at this level.
His lap in that last qualifying segment was 1 minute 18.875, so that's his benchmark, and I'm sure if he can improve upon it, he'll be happy with the progress. And I mean, it is a large task for somebody of limited experience, and particularly in this style of racing. So one lap qualifying, the pressure of it, making sure you keep your tyres warm, make sure you keep the pressures up. All these things you've got to think about. It's not just simply about a 6-hour race and sit back and tune into Radio 2.
Certainly not. He's got to really work at this, and here he is coming out onto the start-finish line. This is his hot lap, so let's see what time it is. 1:18.8 is what he achieved earlier on, and it's a slightly slower lap this time. It's a 1:19.3.
Yeah, now that may be a disappointment. We don't know whether they may well have opted not to run that final set of new tyres and maybe hold them back for the race. But certainly those at the front will go for the new tyre route. As we look at Satrio Hermanto, 1.7 seconds down. So that may well see Indonesia. They currently are in 18th place on an 18.619. And that was 3.2 seconds away from the provisional pole time. So Satrio Hermanto might find himself getting nearer to the bottom of the top 10.
Yeah, let's see. 18th currently. Does this jump him up at all? Across the line he goes. No, he stays 18th. It's a slightly faster time, but it's not enough to displace China, who's the next best on the provisional grid. Again, it's a surprise that China are really struggling here this weekend. They're not coming up with the sort of times that we would have expected.
No, and there's been a struggle literally for King Tung around the racetrack. As Marco Andretti dives down the inside, not getting too much assistance from Indonesia as they come in. France out early. Nicholas Prost out early indeed.
Yeah, it is USA's out lap, so it wasn't he's not on his quick lap yet, so the fact that he went, and Prost has lost it! Prost goes off, and he's in the gravel, just keeps it off the tyres. Big intake of breath there from French team manager Eric Bouillet, and surely that's going to bring the red flag out, and that could mess things up for some of the people who are sitting, waiting in the pits, preparing. And he got thrown by trying to go past that Korean car, but it looked like Prost's own mistake.
Yes, the Korean car did get in the way, and clearly Nicholas Prost on a flying lap, going a little bit quicker than those around him, and he had to make the commitment to go wide, and of course by going wide he picked up on the dirtier part of the racetrack, and that's all it takes. A low grip surface, a bit of dust on the track, and big commitment, having to get off the throttle, on the brakes, turn the wheel. So many things going on the driver's mind at that one time, but those that were out on the track, New Zealand had just gone out, so had China. So 2 cars. Have you seen the New Zealand car? No,
yeah, this is the French car. You're on board with him when he went off.
He comes on, he's off the throttle, on the brakes, and he's already losing it before he gets to pass. The car doesn't hit anything, luckily. No damage to the car, other than, of course, the damages to the last time.
He's on the dirty part of the track there, isn't he?
Absolutely. You could see when he came round, he was wide, and he had little room for negotiation. He had to get past the Korean car to keep his time. Eric Boulet, team manager for Team France, he's disgusted. He feels that maybe the Korean car didn't do enough. The Korean car was on the racing line coming in after completing a lap, and I think Eric Boulet and Team France may want to take this a bit further.
Well, that's so disappointing. He was 10th provisionally after the first qualifying segment, and now he's thrown away any chance of improving on that. Everyone now will wait and see whether this session will restart. Now, at the moment, the clock is ticking away, and that's standard rules in A1GP, but they were told in the team manager's briefing that if there was a chance, they would try and give them a bit of extra time if this happened. Well, we'll have to wait and see, because, of course, the whole thing has run a bit deeper than expected with that delay we had earlier on. The big question mark now, are the guys going to get a chance to come back out, or are the positions going to be as they stand right now, which see Great Britain on top from this man, Adam Carroll, for Team Ireland?
There's going to be a lot of big ifs here, because we've got to get this French car removed, and it does take a little bit of time here at Chengdu to get these cars removed to safety. Nicholas Prost out of the car, still with a hands and neck device on his shoulders and helmet off, and he is disgusted. I have to say fairly as well, because the Korean car should have been more aware of traffic, particularly in a qualifying segment like this, that are on flying laps, especially if you're coming back into the pit. So maybe a race director might take him aside and give him a little talking to and make him aware of his responsibilities, and hopefully not cause a problem in the future. Yeah, he was on that flying lap, as you say, and needed to get past the Korean car, and it was a very difficult place to do it. Get on the dirty stuff, and there you go. I tell you what, it's an object lesson to everybody that if they ever thought they could slip down the inside in a racing maneuver to take a position, that you're going to be very careful if you're going to do that, because anything offline is not clean, and it will punish. Yeah, absolutely right. So at the moment, Danny Watts on provisional pole for Great Britain. Big question is, are we going to see this session restarted? And if so, can anybody go quicker than a 1:15.325? That's where he sits at the moment. 1:15.356 for Adam Carroll, just at 31 thousandths of a second slower. Very, very tight. These brand new cars, John, everyone's still getting up to speed with the new car powered by Ferrari, of course, and yet we're seeing very, very competitive times, and that's what it's all about. Yeah, more running, the better. Everybody will get to know the car, the drivers will understand its character, and the character is actually a high downforce car, and particularly when we go to circuits such as Sepang in a couple of weeks' time, a circuit that I can't wait to get to see, because these cars are going to look stunning there. Yeah. I mean, I know reports from Adam Carroll and Neil Yarney, who were testing at Silverstone prior to coming out here. They were talking about going through Copse Corner with just a brief lift and back on the throttle, not even braking, and minimum cornering speed in Copse was 145 miles an hour. So that's big corner, big commitment, and you're going to get that sort of cornering speeds in Malaysia. Now look at the top left-hand corner of the screen, and you'll see the clock has actually gone back and stopped to 4 minutes 47. So race control have decided, John, that this session will restart, and Robert Dornbos rubbing his hands in glee, because they will get just under 5 minutes of running to complete this session, as long as, of course, that no one else goes off. Well, there's always that possibility, but the key will be who will hang back, who is again going to roll the dice and wait until the last possible moment, or are we going to see the bulk of the field? And we've only got, in effect, what, two qualifying times. We should have another, well, whether Italy gets out or not, certainly another 17 cars to go. Jinwoo Huang, the man who was on his slowing down lap there when France tried to get past and ended up losing control coming into the chicane. Meanwhile, Neil Yarney just sits patiently waiting for his opportunity to come back out. He wants to improve on fourth. At the moment, things haven't quite gone to plan for him. He was expecting to be battling for pole position. Well, in the first round of qualifying, of course, we lost the second segment, and he's third on the grid for the sprint race. Currently sits fourth on the grid for the feature race, and he will be one of those to watch. No doubt about it. He's shown great pace here all weekend. He's got the skills. We've seen that before. They are the reigning title holders, and Switzerland will be very determined to try and claw something back from this and try and take pole position. But Great Britain currently there with their new driver Danny Watts, and they'll be doing everything they can to hold on to it. Oh yes, and well, tense moments. I mean, it is difficult for a driver in a situation like this. They like things to run to order. They don't like change, particularly when you're sitting in a car and the old mind starts to play tricks and you think, well, what do I do? Do I go out at the earliest opportunity, or am I going to sit back and wait and see whether, with what, let's say just under 2 minutes to go, whether it's worth at that point going back out on track. Under 2 minutes is going to be very difficult because just you've got to make sure you get your lap in before the checkered flag comes out.
So we're still waiting for the session to get underway again, but we're certainly going to have a wonderful battle for pole when it does, I think. We saw Marco Andretti a little moment ago. We spoke a little earlier on, James, just talking to Hinch down at the pits. James, again, we've talked about this situation where the drivers are now so keyed up, aren't they? You're into that final segment of qualifying now, and you've got this delay again. I mean, it's so easy to overdo it, isn't it, when you get out there?
Yeah, it really is. But I think right now they're actually more excited than before. I think most drivers were disappointed to not get that second run in Q2, but now, having thought that they were going to be robbed of their second chance for the feature race, they're all pretty revved up. They know that the start's going to be coming soon. They know they've got one more chance to do it. So I think we're going to see all the drivers coming out together, and you know, you're going to have everybody complaining in traffic, but you're going to have a lot of guys trying to put down quick laps at the same time. It's going to be really exciting, and it might just come down to that last guy who crosses the line, because he might just get that slightly better track position.
Jay, you've been in that position before, not maybe quite as identical as this, but you're sitting in your car. What thoughts are actually going through your mind apart from what you might do later on this evening?
Well, I'll tell you what, if I'm Danny Watts or if I'm Adam Carroll, I'm actually a little bit nervous right now because they had the front row lock. They were sitting pretty. Anybody else from 2nd through 20th, or from 3rd, sorry, through 20th on the grid, they are really looking forward to this last run.
Did you, James, did you see that incident on screen, the one between Nicholas Prost and the Korean car? What was your take on that?
Yeah, I did, and I think it's just something that we've kind of seen as a recurring trend so far this weekend is offline, it's just incredibly dirty. When we first showed up here on Friday, everywhere was dirty, but obviously the drivers ran down a nice racing line, but we've seen guys in practice sessions 6 inches offline looping the cars, and I think Nicholas just got caught out by maybe an ill-timed bump on the dirty side of the racetrack and, you know, a little bit of driver error. But I think, like you guys touched on earlier, it's going to be something that drivers would have paid attention to for the race, because if you're making moves, making passes offline, it is very slippery right now.
Absolutely right. Well, let's see what happens when this session does restart. As you say, maybe a little bit of nervousness now for Danny Watts, as he knows he's got to go out and protect that 1 minute 15.3 second lap, and could see some ear protection.
I was just going to say, don't fiddle with them, Sonny, because those are there to give your ears that little bit of protection. Of course, engine notes very loud, and for young children it's not always advisable to expose them to that level of noise, but youngsters will be youngsters. They'll want to pull them out, fiddle with them, and here's another group that's absorbed by what was in theirs. Again, that replay of the incident on the approach to turn 12. I mean, in reality, it was the Korean car being on the racing line that caused this situation in the first place. But Nicholas Prost had no option. He had to make the pass. He had to take the opportunity. But the track is offline, very difficult. Green flag, so the track is open, and qualifying is back underway.
Great.
4 minutes and 38 seconds.
This is what I enjoy, John. This is where we're into the crux of the matter, the final few minutes of qualifying. It's tight up at the top with the top 3 cars covered by, what, 7.5 hundredths of a second. Battle is on.
Just as long as we don't get the red mist here in the commentary booth.
Absolutely. Now, look at New Zealand. They're early out. Brazil, who have qualified already in 7th place, they've decided to go for it pretty soon. They don't want to get caught out if there is another red flag. So a few teams choosing different strategies here, and looks as though Australia going out now as well.
Big problem will be when these cars come around to complete their outlap, they'll probably find other cars that will have decided to go out, and they'll be on their outlap at the point when these first cars are doing their flying lap, and hopefully drivers will use their mirrors. They will be reluctant to get offline because everybody knows that offline the track is dirty. So what's going to happen? It's going to be a real mix and match in these, just a few minutes of this session remaining.
So Team Ireland have taken their first ever pole position, but they did it in just the one qualifying segment. Can they take a second one here, do the double in qualifying here at Chengdu? Well, that would be such a boost to them after the disappointments of Zandvoort when they were well up on the grid for the sprint race, but Adam Carroll just got a bit carried away with his right foot in the wet conditions and spun the car at the start of the sprint race, and really everything went backwards from then on in. We're watching the Black Beauty here. No, it's New Zealand, of course. We're used to seeing them up front. Currently, Chris van der Drift is only 16th on the grid, so he needs something special here. He goes on to his flying lap. Let's watch him on the bumps down into turn 1.
1:17.263 was his time in that first segment of feature qualifying. He needs to take at least a second off that to find himself at the races, and even that probably is not going to see him very much better than the bottom of the top 10.
Looks pretty good at the moment. You can see the new tyres do give the guys a lot more grip. Gets it over to the outside. He tends to use a lot of road, a bit more road perhaps than some of the guys like Niliani, who are carefully choosing their lines to avoid the worst of the bumps. You're now riding with the Brazilian car, just a little behind New Zealand with Felipe Guimarães.
Yeah, so New Zealand just ahead by a corner. Guimarães slides the car, throttle on. That's the back of the car, drift round. The New Zealand car, the flow of New Zealand's looks a lot better than we might have watched in some of the earlier segments. Through this long turn 9, downhill into turn 10. Use a bit of curb, not a problem now. Staying very much on the right-hand side of the corner, hugging pretty much the corner all the way through, just letting it run out sort of 3/4 way through the corner. Then swings quite aggressively on the steering wheel. He also, I think, sits a little bit higher than I would like a driver to be. Get the weight as low as possible, get the centre of gravity as low as possible.
Now this should be an improvement for New Zealand. Where does it put them? Well, it's not that much of an improvement. It's 15th, in fact. Across the line goes Brazil 7th, so that lap was not quite so quick from Felipe Guimarães.
No, here we see John Martin from Australia. John Martin on a 1:16.6 from his first segment, so whether the track conditions have changed that they've Australia 16.289, and he picks up just about half a second.
That's great, good effort by John Martin. He made a mistake this morning, went off, damaged the nose cone, but he's come back well here at the moment, 6th quickest. But on track early, Great Britain have gone for a relatively early run. Well, I say early, we've only got a minute and a quarter left, so they've got to get out there now, really. And Danny Watts onto his flying lap.
So we'll have to keep an eye on that first sector to see if the young man from Aylesbury can maintain that provisional position into turn 1, gets in early, hugs the curb all the way around. That seems to be the preferred line. It's not necessarily the ideal one, but in these conditions it's the preferred one.
Let's ride with him into turn 3 now. Another hairpin, little short blast once again. Tight corners these. Again, they've got to watch the bumps, watch for the oversteer on the exit. That's where he's got on the 600 horsepower, maybe a bit of a bump, kicks the back end of the car out.
Team France actually had the fastest first sector time of everybody. Danny Watts 0.2 of a second away from that, but unfortunately for France, they didn't get to complete their run.
Yeah, poor Nicolas Prost, he just wants to go away and hide, I should think, after what happened earlier. Riding still with Danny Watts, though, trying to protect pole position here for the feature race. He's coming downhill into turn 10, into the left-hander.
Yes, just over a 1/10 and a bit of a second down as he comes through in now turn 11. Keep the car nice and level, straighten it up on the brakes, down into turn 12.
A lot of cars are on their hot laps and they're all doing very similar times. It's going to be absolutely fascinating to see who comes out on top in this one. Danny Watts is going to come across the line. I'm not sure this is going to be any quicker than his previous best. Here, 1:15.3 he did do, and now it's a 1:15.5. He stays quickest for the moment, but there are a few cars going fast behind him.
0.2 of a second down, but that's as close as anybody has been to the time outside of Australia, who did improve significantly. Flag is waved. South Africa come across the line, and it's a 1/5.
Go 4th. They move up 1.
15.947.
Malaysia jump up to 5th. That's more like it for Malaysia. Sudden improvement. Now where's Switzerland going? Switzerland could challenge for the top spot. No, it's 4th. Only 4th for Team Switzerland.
Watch Ireland in the background.
Yeah, this could be good for Adam Carroll. Going for the double pole, but he doesn't make it. He stays 2nd, and a few more. There's the Netherlands, and these laps are not as quick, you know, John. It's not as quick now, I think, as it was early. India has had a problem. Whether they've had, or they're just coming in, maybe.
And Portugal coming up to complete their lap. Portugal still provisionally 3rd. Portugal, do they stay 3rd? Yes, they do.
Yeah, again, it's their first lap that proves to be the quickest. So in that session, Switzerland did improve slightly, but they stayed 4th. South Africa improved up to 5th. Malaysia, one of the biggest improvers, and Monaco as well. Monaco has come up to 7th. Italy on track, interestingly. So Italy have put a time in, despite that earlier problem with broken front suspension. Good to see the Italians got the car out. But I tell you what, Great Britain has taken pole position here for the feature race. It's Ireland on pole for the sprint race. It's Great Britain with Danny Watts, new driver at Team GBR. And what a response that is from the British team. This car was only finished here at Chengdu thanks to the hard work of all the guys. An overnighter, absolutely no sleep at all those guys had on Thursday night, like of course many of the teams had in Zandvoort. To be fair, most of the teams have gone through this, but what a return that is by Danny. He said to me earlier on today, I want to do something for the boys to thank them and reward them for all the work that they've put in. Well, what's better than to take pole position for the feature race here in Chengdu, and that is absolutely outstanding effort for a man who hasn't done a great deal of single-seater racing recently in competing in the Porsche Supercar. I did wonder if something had happened to Lorraine Carter-Cahen, and it proves as though it did. He went through the gravel coming up to the chicane, so he lost it at the same sort of place that Nicholas Cross lost it, but he went to the outside instead of the inside. So the cars coming down into Parc Fermé, and it's Great Britain that has taken pole for the feature race. Ireland will be starting alongside them on the front row, but Portugal right up there in third ahead of Switzerland. South Africa will start fifth. Malaysia, recovering from a poor qualifying session in the sprint race, will start sixth. Monaco an excellent seventh ahead of the Netherlands. Then Australia up there in the top 10 with Philippe Guimaraes. USA 11th on the grid, Nicholas Prost 12th, despite that problem earlier. Then further down the order, surprise there for New Zealand, only 15th, that is a surprise. And poor old China, host nation, they'll be starting 17th ahead of Indonesia, Italy and Korea.
Welcome back. Qualifying over, the grid positions for the sprint and feature races look like this. In the sprint, Adam Carroll records the first pole for Team Ireland. Team Netherlands sitting in second with Robert Dumbus in his debut season and making an impact here. Neil Yarni for Team Switzerland in third. And GBR and Danny Watts in a fourth position for the sprint. They bettered that in the feature. On his debut, Danny Watts takes pole for the feature race. Also on the front row, Team Ireland, once more a double front row for them this weekend. Team Portugal with Filipe Albuquerque in the driving seat in third spot. Tony Jardine been watching all of that action with me. An interesting qualifying session, Tony, one of which was cancelled, session 2, which meant that session 1 was all that mattered for that sprint race grid. That hasn't happened in A1GP before. Was that the best way to deal with it, just cancel the session?
No other way around it, because the facility's not up to scratch. They don't have all the vehicles to pull them away, and I think with the local staff and everything, they're a little bit slow and not used to it. But as far as Ireland is concerned, they'd all already put in a fantastic lap. That's the thing with Adam, he's blindingly quick. They had a test session at Silverstone a little while ago before they went to China. Again, he was very quick there, but he messed up so badly in Holland, if you remember, when he was just coming round for the sprint race. He was lying in third place and he spun at the beginning of the event. He spun in the feature race. He's looking to make amends here, really big style. But Danny Watts, that's a superb performance. Absolutely brilliant to get the pole in the feature. And I'm so impressed because they're one of the teams that have got their car so late along with Mexico. The boys have been doing all-nighters and building this thing as they go.
We're going to look at both of those boys in just a minute. Before we do that, though, let's take a look at Narain Karthikeyan in action in the Team India car in session 1. He's back in the hot seat, struggling a little bit out there today, Tony. Is he just demonstrating how bumpy and difficult this track is to drive?
Well, you see, Narain Karthikeyan, he's one of the brave sort of wild drivers, and just to illustrate there how bad this circuit can be and how the drivers during the race have got to battle the track. And all its bumps and all its quirks, as well as the car. So what they're going to do with the car is make it soft and make it a compromise so that the car can absorb the bumps at the same time.
It certainly is a pretty challenging circuit. There are even water springs in amongst that circuit, causing wet conditions here and there. Let's take a look at Team Ireland in action then, shall we? Because Adam Carroll, very impressive today. Confident that he could do a job here, Tony, and fortune smiling on him in P1.
Yeah, because they really need to keep the momentum going at the end of last season, which they did after their breakthrough win at Mexico and then their podium at Brands Hatch. They expected to go into Zandvoort and do it, and Adam really was to blame for that. So he's looking to get up on the podium, and it's their first ever pole position. So I think that's fantastic for Ireland, and in round 2 here they are, they're looking good.
So session 2, as we said, cancelled because of difficulty in managing to get Team Italy's car off the track. So let's move on to the feature race grid as it was determined through qualifying and take a look at session 3, because New Zealand have gone for Chris van der Drift in the car this weekend instead of Earl Bamber. Is this a wise move in your opinion, Tony?
Not in my opinion at all. I thought Earl Bamber was sensational.
Why have they made the change?
I have no idea. I think perhaps it's a policy change from New Zealand. The lock up there, it's just, he's been very uncomfortable complaining about the bumps through here. Chris van der Drift, yes, he's Formula Masters champion, but Earl Bamber for me was so lightning quick and so good. Unless they've got a policy this year that they're going to rotate the drivers.
Maybe they'll prove us wrong come race day tomorrow. Team USA, well, they've got Mario Andretti in the driving seat. Let's take a look at him in action. Here he is, Marco Andretti in the car. Big star in America. Are you impressed with how well he's coped with expectation here?
Yeah, because for him it's going to be about adapting. For him it's about, you know, you're doing Indy cars, you're doing a lot of the roundy stuff as well as the street circuits. It's a whole different ball game for them. So coming to compete against the Europeans and the Asians, it's really alien environment for them. And I think he's adapting superbly well. And I think it's fabulous for the series. But Marco Andretti is this long line of successful Andrettis. You know, his grandfather Mario, his dad Michael, who's here as well. I think he's going to be very, very good. And I think that a lot is expected of him. Honda have given him a test a couple of years ago. He's got an eye on a Grand Prix seat. But what he wants to do is win the Indianapolis 500 before he goes into Grand Prix racing, if he can make the grade. This is all part of his training.
Well, let's see what he made of qualifying in his first A1GP race weekend. Here he is speaking to Diana Binks.
Marco, obviously your first event here in A1GP. How did it go, and are you happy with where you ended up?
Oh, no, definitely not. We were in the middle of our quick lap on when it went red, so you know, kind of got caught out there. So we had to go out and try again on the second run on tires, which is never going to be good. At least we matched our time, but you know, definitely disappointed because there might be a little bit more speed than we've been showing lately, but and it's unfortunate.
Early days, but the circuit here is really difficult, isn't it? Everyone's been finding this sort of conditions quite hard.
Yeah, it's going to be, the race is going to be attrition, I think, because it's going to be easy to make mistakes. I mean, the steering's pretty heavy through the long G-loaded corners. You're in the corner for a long time, so it's easy to mess up. But you know, it's one of those things, if the car's working, then it's fun. But you know, we still have a couple things to do to make it fun.
Marco featuring this weekend. Danica Patrick will feature at some stage during the course of this A1GP season. Now, how do you think the drivers out there on the grid already are going to react to these two big stars? They're two big names coming into the series. Are they going to be desperate to go out there and pit their wits against them, or will they be perhaps slightly intimidated by them?
Neil Jarni, the champion, he's already said, we've got these big names coming in. That's fine, it's great for the series, but what we want to see is some respect from them, because they're in our environment, they're on our patch. They might be massive, they might be big heroes back in the United States of America, but A1GP and here against the Europeans on really tough circuits around the world is going to be a big test for them. So they ought to show some respect, which I thought was a great comment, especially considering that Neil Jarni was an IndyCar driver himself, and he talks with authority because he's had second places over there in the US of A.
Andretti Green's expectations for the season, are they going to come in here and they're going to expect to win it? Is that what they want to do with this championship, or do they just want to be competitive?
No, I don't think they do. I think Michael Andretti's clearly said that it's good for the team to get international experience. It's great for his son Marco to get international experience as he builds to following in the footsteps of his grandfather and going into Grand Prix. Mario Andretti himself was world champion in 1978 for Lotus, and he drove for Colin Chapman. You know, he is a god in the sport. They are a royal racing dynasty, as we've said. So to a degree, the USA do expect them to succeed, but it's going to be tough, and he's going to take time to adapt.
They bring a wealth of experience, of course, to A1GP, but presumably this does great things for A1GP's profile out in America.
Well, I think it's fabulous because you've got Ferrari, you've got the Ferrari connection, and now you've got a very, very strong American connection. The strongest in terms of a family and a dynasty. And therefore, I think that it's a very strong thing. It goes along with having Emerson Fittipaldi and Brazil involved. It goes along with having Alan Jones involved with Australia. You know, that's real quality and strength in depth.
OK, well, let's move on and then talk about Team GBR, because a great lap from Danny Watts in session 3 meant that he secured P1. Just talk us through how confidently he's driving here.
Well, I think he's driving superbly well. What we must remember is that Danny Watts has not raced in a single-seater since his time in Formula 3, and we're talking about going back to 2005, 2006 when he drove the Lola car and got that one-off win. He's been racing in sports cars at Le Mans, he's been racing Porsches. But I think credit must also go here to James Winslow, who is the rookie driver, who walked him around the circuit and has been here before as well, helped Danny a lot.
Well, let's hear what Danny thought of his qualifying session and, of course, P1. He's been speaking with John Watson.
Danny, pole position for the feature race. First time as a race driver for A1GP. You've been a rookie and you did some of the testing with the new car.
Yeah, a lot was said about that. 2 days in effect with the problems that we had with the car. It ended up being, I think, 120k per day roughly. So, I mean, we're lucky to be here, to be honest, because the car was in bits this time last week. And in fact, 2 days ago it was in bits. And the boys have worked through the night. Last 2 nights, I think they've had 4 hours sleep. So this result in qualifying is all credit to them and thanks for the hard work.
OK, now the first segment of the feature race qualifying was the quickest. Why was the second session slower?
I'm not sure. Difficult one, that. We haven't gone through it yet, but I don't think my second time was too far off the first one, so for me it wasn't too bad. We made a small change on the car. Car was running fantastic throughout, so very pleased to be 4th and pole.
OK, Danny, you're on the second row for the sprint race, the rolling start. Quick thoughts for Sunday?
Nothing yet, no.
Quick, Danny, come on with the programme, son.
No, just, yeah, we've just got to focus on tomorrow now, and I think the set will be slightly different from qualifying strategy. And just going to go for it and we'll see what happens.
Fingers crossed for Danny tomorrow. My thanks to Tony for joining me today. Join us both for race day tomorrow. We're going to be live from 5:30 on Sunday morning. Let's just remind you of that. Sky Sports Extra from Chengdu, China. There you go. There'll also be live NASCAR as well later on in the day. The penultimate race in the chase for the Sprint Cup. That's from 8:30 on Sunday night. It comes to you from the Phoenix International Raceway. So GBR and Ireland on top in China, securing P1 and P2. Can they convert pole positions, though, into race wins? Join us tomorrow to find out.
I believe that you and me last forever. Oh yeah, all day and night I'm yours.